Hello everyone, welcome to my video where I'm going to discuss something I'm a little concerned about. I'm not gonna lie. So as you can see here, I have a Forbes article, uh, and it's just talking about scientists who have uh, perhaps discovered that there is transfer of H5N1 bird flu, highly pathogenic avian influenza, between mammals. There's, of course, concern in the United States of the fact that H5N1, avian influenza or bird flu, is impacting cattle or dairy. Why is that concerning for the potential of human to human transmission? Well, of course, working with cattle, a lot of humans work with cattle. Unfortunately, some of those workers are low income. Perhaps they don't have the means and reason to miss work to get testing. I think I've read that perhaps many are undocumented, of course, and fearful of any U.S. three-letter agency, right? Completely understandable. So there's concern, I think, particularly in human influenza season as we get into the winter months, of possibly some recombinant interaction between H5N1 and human influenza, or just enough exposure to H5N1 that finally we do get that one transmission of H5N1 that is capable, that has evolved in some way to transfer from human to human. That's concerning. That's very concerning. I want to strictly stay to the facts if I can, and one of those is that not all diseases immediately go full pandemic, right? So SARS-CoV-2, coronavirus, COVID-19, that was our most recent experience with a quite contagious infectious disease, and with that came some a quite unique experience in a disease that had jumped quite quickly to humans and had very efficient sustained transmission through asymptomatic carriers and such. Not all diseases do this. So it's not that H5N1 may jump quite quickly to humans, but what is concerning is that we get something like SARS-CoV-1, which I believe had an estimated fatality rate around 3% in some newer studies, and I've heard it as ranged high as 10%, but and of course it affected older populations differently. Different groups had different reactions to the virus, and of course different rates of fatality. So my concern is an incident like SARS-CoV-1, which the disease triggers an immediate pandemic that within a month or 2 months just spreads across the world after our initial news reports. No, what I am fearful of is something we can stop, but we don't. Something that is entirely preventable, and we don't stop it. Now, I think that is entirely dependent on where H5N1 makes that jump to where, for whatever reason, whatever environmental factors are there, H5N1 can somehow make that jump to human transmission. And of course, if it makes people very ill, no one knows what it's going to be like. Let's stick to the facts. No fear mongering. This could be, if it does become a pandemic influenza, it could be something like H1N1. That would be good news. To be fair, that would be good news. That was not a highly pathogenic influenza, even though it was concerning that it was a swine flu, of course. We always think back to 1918. Not every pandemic is a worst case scenario. There are many influenza pandemics. 1968, I think there was one in the 1970s. Of course, we had 2008, 2009, H1N1. Here we're looking at what is, of course, is concerning is the history of H5N1. Highly pathogenic, carried a 40 to 50% fatality rate. That does not mean that if the virus evolves to human transmission, it will maintain that. That would be counter evolutionary, right? So, But if we get something like 2 to 3% fatality rate, makes people very ill, we can contain something like that. But where this starts is where it is concerning. And of course, what is my concern? What is the concern? It's that in the United States, we had significant political divide in regards to many of the practices that reduced or altered the spread of COVID-19. And of course, I think we saw differing death rates. I'm playing a video from Vox here. We saw problems within specific populations in regard to public health measures. Now, I don't want to overtly stay on the idea that it is just conservatives who are anti-science or anti-public health or these things. That is not true. There are many populations, of course, throughout the world, but I'm a U.S. citizen, so I'm going to stick to what I know. In the United States, on all sides of the political spectrum that have mistrust in institutions, those institutions have earned that mistrust. They've earned it. Now, we have to stay logical and reasonable in assessing that not everything is a conspiracy. We have made significant advancements and improvements in health and of course public health. We did so good with reducing infectious diseases that we made a transition in public health into assessing chronic health conditions. We did so well with addressing infectious diseases that when I say we as humanity have worked ourselves out of that job to some extent. Of course, we've always had to maintenance that work. And of course, what we're seeing right now is the failure of that maintenance, a resurgence of some diseases that we don't want to see. Measles, polio. There was a strain of polio related to the vaccine that was going around because, of course, it was decline in the polio vaccine. Now, particularly people are opting out of childhood vaccines, measles, mumps, rubella, those things, right? So what I'm concerned about is where a human-to-human H5N1 epidemic takes place. So if it somehow impacts a group of individuals who are non-compliant to public health measures, we are going to have a much harder time preventing an H5N1 epidemic from turning into a pandemic. It's that simple. That's concerning. And the politicalization of public health, of healthcare, and the earned mistrust in institutions, again, is a problem for future pandemics in the sense that, while yes, I believe the measures that we took during COVID saved lives. I believe they were necessary on a utilitarian perspective. There were consequences of it, of course. But this idea that the information that we have is fake, it's one thing to criticize and to take a political or ethical stance on certain things. Perhaps you believe that the government cannot make interventions like that. They cannot restrict liberty, and no matter someone's safety. That's a fair argument to make. I don't think it's reasonable. I would argue against it, but that's a different story than, well, the lockdowns didn't work. The vaccines don't save lives. That's different. You're delegitimizing the actual means of helping people and of saving lives, but rather instead of making the actual point you want to make, or that the economy is more important. It's critical that we address these things, and I think it's a scary time that we live in because H5N1 is not our only concern, and of course a second pandemic could be worse a further decline in public health responsiveness could be so much worse. Even if it just if it carried the same fatality rate, it acted just the same. We could have a worse situation on our hands. That's horrible. But the same type of rhetoric that people are using to delegitimize public health is the same type of rhetoric that they use to delegitimize environmental concerns. They target the science. They target the actual applicability of the science. Of course. So, for example, it is obvious, I think very obvious, that isolation and lockdowns decrease the spread of a virus. It's that simple. Particularly early in the pandemic, when the R0 was not as high as it was, isolation dropped. It caused the R0 to fall below 1, and the actual rate of disease fell. That is obvious. That is if you believe in the infectious disease model, that the disease spread through germs, through contact with those germs, then it just makes sense. That's common sense that works. But to target that and say that is I don't get it. I don't. Because realistically, what I think the people higher up that want to say that it's the economy that's more important. It's the thing that benefits them. Of course, a lot of people benefited from making statements that were absurd. People who had no clout had clout. Doctors who had no name had a name. And of course, if we're looking at environmentalism, it's the oil companies that directly have motivation to target that science, delegitimize that science, and benefit from its delegitimization. And they lobby, of course, the political pundits and all of those to do this. So, it's bad that we live in this type of society currently, that this is what we deal with, and this is what we have to work with, and the next few things that we are going to have to deal with as the human species are going to get worse if we don't trust, and I'm not going to say the institutions, but the scientific principles, that we need some sort of science literacy. It is very important that we regather that, because as of now it's bad. It's bad because we're going to face pandemics in the future. It's inevitable. It may not be H5N1. I'm not going to say that H5N1 is an inevitable pandemic. That's not true. We should not fearmonger. But it's inevitable that we'll probably have an influenza pandemic at some point in the future. It's just inevitable. It's just inevitable. The political response to that is I don't know what it's going to be. The social response to that is what's going to be concerning. But what if it's not that? What if it's the slow burn? We see how people react to COVID. It caused significant mass fatality, and they still lived in denial. When it's a slow burn towards destruction, like climate change, where's the reactivity? If we can deny what's happening right in front of us, we can certainly deny what is much slower to unfold. So, yeah, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that H5N1 will be entirely preventable, but we just don't. I am concerned that we will have worse and worse health outcomes when we have the tools to stop them. I'm concerned about the uptake of vaccines declining. I'm concerned not only about, infectious diseases and public health measures, and even, these things. I'm concerned about how this will infect environmentalism practices and stuff. The human condition is we are marching towards destruction, yet we are dropping the tools to save ourselves. What do we do? I don't know. I think the key here is we have to increase science literacy. The mechanisms to do that I'm honestly not quite sure. Other than it would be younger generations, of course, getting into schools and making sure that we teach really how to evaluate hypotheses and tests and experimentation and all these. We have to teach these things, or it's but again, time is of the essence, and the next pandemic may be tomorrow, or it may be 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years away. Who knows? Again, thank you for listening to my little rant. I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.